Hello there, you're watching the press preview for a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. And it's time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the columnist for the article, Ali Mirage. There they are standing by for us. They'll be with us until just before midnight. But first, let's have a look at what's on some of those front pages. The Eye leads with the German and American government's decision to send tanks to Ukraine. A move the paper calls an escalation of the war. In response to this news, the Mail proclaims, finally, the West unites to defend freedom. And the Mirror also leads with the world united against evil, covering the Allies' plans to send huge military support. The Financial Times hears that the American aircraft firm Lockheed Martin is prepared to produce more of its F-16 fighter jets if they're deemed necessary to take part in the conflict. The Metro has word of the Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley's admission that the public can expect to see 2 or 3 of his officers charged with serious crimes every week over the coming months. The Guardian reports that the investigation into complaints of bullying by the Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab is more wide-ranging than previously known. With more than 24 civil servants alleging he mistreated them, he has always denied any wrongdoing. While the Express leads on the cost of living crisis, highlighting the death of a pensioner from hypothermia who was worried about the cost of soaring energy bills. The Telegraph, meanwhile, covers criticism of the post-Brexit trade plans, which the chairman of Marks and Spencer has called baffling and overbearing. And the Star ponders the prospect of sending nuclear-powered rockets to Mars. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you're seeing on your screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And of course, we're joined tonight by Kevin Maguire and Ali Mirage. A very good evening to you both. Great to see you. Lots to talk about and a good mix of stories on the front pages as we've seen them so far, but certainly many of them, of course, leading on this decision by America and Germany today to send battle tanks to Ukraine. Kevin, to you first. The front page of The Eye talks about this in some detail, that President Biden insists the decision to send American Abrams is not meant to heighten the war, but of course, there is a concern for President Zelensky over the delivery time of these tanks.
No, absolutely. And tanks are the most dominant story on the front pages in tomorrow's papers. And Zelensky wants them as quickly as possible. Military people are talking about between 3 and 6 months. It could be late spring, early summer before the tanks arrive and are operational, because it's not like having a new car delivered and you just get in it and drive away. You've got to be trained how to operate what are really complex pieces of equipment. But it's interesting, the Eye go and talking about hold back Putin rather than winning a decisive victory. They also quote Lord West, who is a Labour peer now, former head of the Royal Navy, chief of the Defence Staff, saying Putin's bluff has been called, while at the same time the Kremlin are saying, look, these tanks are going to burn. Well, a lot of Russian T-72s have burned. So it does feel like an escalation and the war is heightened, whatever Biden says.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. And Ali, to you, the front page of Kevin's newspaper, the Daily Mirror, also leading with this story, the headline, "The World United Against Evil." And certainly it does seem that decision from America to send their Abrams tanks has potentially unlocked Germany's decision to send the Leopard 2s. For a while there, when they had that meeting in Ramstein, it didn't seem that there was necessarily a united front among international partners, but that is what President Biden is now maintaining. We are thoroughly united.
Well, Sally, I think it's very important. It was very important for Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, to be able to tell his people and to sell to his people that this is completely united, and all the key allies, particularly the US, was on board and is putting its money where its mouth is in terms of sending Abrams tanks. Now, there's been a lot of talk in recent days about the Abrams tanks being much bigger, very difficult to maneuver. They need a lot of support. And it was really the Leopard 2 tanks that the Ukrainians wanted. There are plenty of them in Europe. The Germans have many of them, and also the Germans hold the keys to the export licenses that allow other people in Europe, particularly the Polish, to send their tanks to Ukraine. And that was not forthcoming until now. The reason it wasn't forthcoming from Olaf Scholz was really very simple. He knows that 40 to 45% of his own population are very nervous about sending tanks to Ukraine. And the reason they're nervous is two reasons. One, there's a historical reluctance following the Second World War for understandable reasons to be at the forefront of military action. And secondly, you look at the potential of dealing with a nuclear power where the thing could escalate. So it was very worrying for him. So he understands now that the US has done the right thing. They're sending Abrams tanks. He can give this united front impression. And military experts are saying that the Leopard 2 tanks they're much faster than any other tank out there. They travel at about 72 kilometers an hour and have a better stabilization than the Russian tanks that they're up against, the T-72s, T-90s, which means that they can actually fire at speed, which will give them give the Ukrainians a superior advantage on the battlefield. So it's a seismic change for the Ukrainians, but it is an escalation. I mean, that's absolutely clear. And the next thing is whether F-16s are going to be the next thing that are going to be asked for and provided. Now, at the moment, that's not the case. But if you go back 6 months, any offensive weapon whatsoever, particularly tanks, were completely off the table. So you can see how this is escalating and creeping. And this is all done because there's a potential spring offensive from Russia that's expected to come. And the Ukrainians want to be well equipped, understandably, to tackle that. So I think Olaf Scholz has eventually done the right thing. But I think it was quite sensible for him to be cautious and get other allies on board before he made that move.
Yeah, the Germans consistently said they didn't want it to just be their German tanks on the ground in Ukraine. To the front page of the Daily Mail, Kevin, their headline, finally, the West unites to defend freedom, talking about Boris Johnson's rallying cry for allies to end their dithering. I mean, it's not clear what involvement, if any, Boris Johnson's had in any of this, but certainly the UK was the first country to offer its tanks.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear what involvement Boris Johnson's had, and it's zero. I don't think he's got any clout with Biden and the US decision to send Abrams, or Schultz deciding to send Leopards, or Poland. It's just the Mail trying to put itself and Boris Johnson, its back championing and cheerleading for as it falls out of love with Rishi Sunak, who never wanted to be prime minister in the first place. He favoured Liz Truss back in the day before that 44-day disaster. So, look, the West has actually been pretty united for some time. There's just been disagreements over quite what level of support is given. You know, I mean, Hungary may be questionable because of its links with Russia and the far right government there and Putin and so on. But I think the West is pretty united. The world I'm less sure about, because you've got to think that China and India aren't backing Ukraine, South Africa not. So there are large parts of the world that maybe they're not sympathetic to Putin, but they're not backing Ukraine either. But I quite like the cheek of the Mail, put itself and Johnson at the heart of it. But it just ain't the case. You've got to say, neither had any influence on this decision. Well,
it's interesting you say that, but he was, of course, visiting President Zelensky in Kyiv just a few days ago, which is interesting that he's still sort of playing some sort of role, Ali. What's your take on all of that? I mean, he's absolutely adored in Ukraine. Members of the public tell you that regularly when you're over there, voluntarily. Sometimes it's the only words in English that they know. We love Boris Johnson. But it's interesting, isn't it, that he's still out there speaking to President Zelensky?
Well, I mean, he's got a very good relationship with Zelensky. We understand that a number of Ukrainian babies being born will be named Boris, which clearly is understandable given the fact that Boris Johnson was at the forefront of stepping up right from the outset to support Ukraine. And obviously, Boris Johnson still dreams of a second coming, like his great hero Winston Churchill as prime minister. I can't particularly see it happening myself. He's got a very marginal seat in Uxbridge, which he's said he will contest. He's not doing a chicken run to a safe seat, which is something, I guess. I think we should give him credit for that. But certainly the demographics of that seat are changing. And I was brought up around there, and it is changing quite rapidly. So if he holds on, which is a big if, then fine. Who knows what could happen? You can never write him off. But frankly, I think that the soap opera that we had to endure under his leadership, frankly, was a period that the Tory party should get over and move on from. He's got many virtues. He's got a witty turn of phrase. He writes decent articles. He gives good speeches. But the serious business of hard-headed governance, unfortunately, was not one of his strengths.
OK, and just a brief look at The Guardian before we go to a break. Their front page also running this story from a US perspective, President Biden approving those tanks for Ukraine. Certainly, Kevin, it is hoped, it's speculated that this could be something of a game changer for this war.
Yeah, it could be, but it might not be, because it's going to be very difficult to dislodge those Russian forces which have dug in. I think a better bet is something happens to Putin, that people internally turn against him. But the Guardian point out, of course, the US is sending 31 tanks. The UK is sending 14. Germany is sending 14. And I think that just shows you how now the real supplier of weapons in the world is for Ukraine. It's by far the US, with Britain and Germany about level pegging in Europe. We sometimes get carried away in the UK thinking it's Britain leading the way. It's not. It's now really the Americans who are arming the Ukrainians.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. And with me now, Kevin Maguire and Ali Miraj to review a couple more of the front pages. To you first, Kevin, Nadhim Zahawi, his job still hanging in the balance as Conservative Party chair, but he must be pretty relieved. He's been pushed off a lot of the front pages today by these battle tanks, but he's still in news in brief on the front page of The Eye.
No, exactly, and then you have to turn to page 8, and The Eye is one of the few papers that has him on the front. And I suspect the whole strategy of Zahawi and Sunak is just to try and batten down the hatches and ride out the storm and hope it goes away. It'd probably suit Labour in some ways if that happened, if he stayed as Conservative Party chair, because there's no doubt he's damaged goods and he'll never be effective again. How can he go around making speeches about the great joys of the Conservative government when there is this big question mark hanging over his taxation? But certainly you're right. The tanks have rolled in, and they've pushed him off the front page. Sunak made, I thought, a passable attempt to defend him today, but I think Starmer got it right when he said, "Look, you're just hopelessly weak," because he's not strong enough to sack him. I mean, that is the truth. The pocket-sized prime minister.
Just a quick thought from you, Ali, on this. Of course, Rishi Sunak maintaining today that he wants to wait for this investigation to be finished by his independent ethics advisor.
Yeah, look, I think Rishi Sunak has got the most difficult job in politics right now. He needs just like a hole in the head. He was trying to talk about money for mental health. He was trying to talk about the levelling up funds that were doled out to 111 areas, and he's got this to deal with. It's deeply, deeply unfortunate, very bad timing, and looks appalling for the party. There's an investigation going on. That's fine. But the politics of it, the optics of it are really, really poor. And Keir Starmer said, is the job too big for Rishi Sunak at Prime Minister's Questions today? And look, call me old-fashioned, but there was something in public life called the Nolan Principles, where you have honesty, transparency, leadership. We need a bit more of that from top-level politicians, really.
Ali, Kevin, we'll have to leave it there. Much more in the next hour. Thanks very much indeed.